DraftScience video. Yay. Alright, overview. I'll do some comments on this last video. And maybe I'll talk about some stuff. But maybe I'll start off by talking about a couple of things that these people don't seem to understand. A lot of people don't seem to understand. The biggest half of what I'm saying is a better definition of causes, not effects. So that's the first thing to understand. I'm saying they have misidentified causes for phenomenon, and that's sort of significant. But the effects, obviously, some of the effects will remain exactly the same. It's just a different cause. So again, there's this idea of a convergence, this idea of a funnel and a waterfall that fills at a consistent level. And so this is an idea of a mathematical equation for this theoretical space. But you can have a lot of ways that this mechanism is created. And the way Einstein is that space itself has this corruption in it. It's not correct. And again, it's like the quantum mechanics duality, wave-particle duality. There's a phenomenon, which is there's a filtering, separation, division of light, and they are blaming the photons for doing it when the mechanism that's doing it is the electrons. They're the ones with the complex behavior, and they're the ones imposing change on the photons. So there is, the effect is the same, the cause is different. Where's the wave? Where's the origin of the wave? Is the wave in the matter the photons are interacting with, or is the wave in the photons? And I'm saying they've misidentified the source of the noise, the aberration, the thing. So I don't know whether it's as consequential when it comes to quantum mechanics. So things that'll be different. These are two. I just mentioned two predictions. Okay, but let's also understand that getting the causes right also ends up doing a thing where, like I said, when I first drew the conclusion that this might be a particle gravity, there was no idea that this would also resolve time dilation, but it does, and I found that. I had to go find that. It was a dilemma. I had to go find it, and it was really, really a simple function of the thing, but it wasn't what you would call obvious. So you had to think about it to find it. And when you find it, it's so fundamental a consequence of the process that, it's pretty strong evidence of it not being a coincidence, that it resolves these different things. And the fact that this particle idea also creates this idea of the possibility of creating magnetism through the filtering of just having two different kinds, two flavors of this gravity, and then you can explain magnetism. It's this is not just coincidence that these explanatory, these things that give you possibility of explanation exist in these theories. They're not in conflict with what we know to be real in the world. They have a huge amount of symmetry with what we know to be real in the world. They explain an awful lot of it on just simple investigation. Imagine what can be done with more complex investigation. But, these people have no imagination. Anyway, so, the two big predictions is, since gravity is a particle force, and I'm arguing it's stuck in a pressure gradient created by the Big Bang. So as the Big Bang exploded, there had to be some denser matter that slowed down the pressure wave, and blocked, essentially. And so photons bounced off of that pressure gradient, that wall. and came back as a pressure. So it equalized the stream of photons in the mix. You know, they were rebound photons. And I don't know whether that matters, how long they've been bouncing around. Obviously they only have so much time since the Big Bang to bounce around. But obviously they have been, the progress of the universe, obviously the Big Bang wasn't an explosion that just went from this to everything ended up out here, traveling at the speed of light. That obviously didn't happen. But anyway, the consequence of a particle gravity is nothing's coming back. You know, light's not going to be pulled back by something. It's going to have to be bounced back, or in some other way forced back, but there's nothing obvious about how it's going to get back. As it gets further out on the pressure gradient, because there is no gravity. So if the gravity is created by a bunch of photonic pressure, obviously on the outside of that bubble of photonic pressure there's not going to be any photonic pressure, and things in that area are going to start accelerating incredibly fast, and they're going to accelerate in one direction, which means they're not going to say goodbye by shining some light at you at the end. The light is going to go in the direction of its movement, its velocity, and it's just going to disappear. Okay, and so that it just explains that this is, this theory would predict, you know, a heat death, you know, cold death, whatever you want to call it, a decomposition of the universe death, and that the death would be, seem to be permanent, unless there's some sort of mechanism to force it otherwise. So anyway, and then what's the other prediction? Oh, then the other prediction is time dilation is not a dilation of space-time. There's no such thing as space-time. There's no such thing as time. Time is a symptom of distance, and the fact that photons have a limited speed. And so time doesn't play a critical role in and of itself. Distance plays a critical role in and of itself, and that's important when you think about springs and frequencies and tension and momentum. All those things are expressions of more distance. They create things, they create time symptoms, but the time symptoms are a symptom of greater distance. Again, it's like my argument that we are bouncing on the surface of the earth, or we're being accelerated by gravity down. The earth pushes us back up, and that we're actually traveling a lot more distance as we travel around the circumference of the earth. Our distance isn't just the distance of a straight line parabola. The distance is this jitter that makes it twice or 3 times or 10 times or 100 times more distance traveled. So where our acceleration, our speed is much faster than the speed of the earth, because we are traveling more distance in the same amount of time. So yes, all of Einstein's theories about, in general relativity, about time dilation aren't true. The clocks actually slow down. The physical metabolisms of things slow down. That's what's happening. The physical processes that they're doing slow down as you increase velocity. And so it's not the space doing it. I guess the other thing, it's, you know, this is both cause and effect, would be the whole idea of the expanding universe. With photonic pressure, that expansion would be certain, in the sense that there would be gradients, densities of gravity, and when you're on the outside of a density, you're going to start moving away. You know, you're going to be moving in a direction, in a velocity, and that everything would, by that sense, as the pressure dissipates, everything's going to appear to be moving in a direction away from. It's not that space is getting bigger, it's that gravity is getting less dense. Is that a way to say it? It's not that it's less dense, it's that it has a gradient, a pressure gradient from, the pressure is not even. And so everything's going to accelerate at a different speed. Everything's going to have a different velocity. But it's going to have a velocity because nothing's in a perfect gravitational field. Nothing's in a gravitational field that's perfectly consistent in terms of being this equal pressure from all sides. So it has built into it a kind of gravity. We're gravitationally being sort of pulled to the edge of the universe because there's greater pressure on the non-edge of the universe side, where there is perceivably nothing, and there's nothing to see and nothing to block your vision. So if you tried to look for the beginning of the universe or the origin of the Big Bang, you would never be able to see it because it's empty. It's like a donut, and you'd end up seeing the other side of the pressure gradient. So you could never really see. If it was spent space, you could never see the funnel. You could never see the convergence in the center. But it's the opposite of what we're doing. We're exploding out, not being drawn in. So, but you could never see the place we came from because there's nothing there. So you can only see the other side of the universe in terms of the other side of the donut. And it would look the same as the side you're looking at. Substantially. Anyway, I think it'd be just as old as you are. And, yeah. Think on that one. Not important, I just threw it in there because I just thought of it. Alright, so yeah, that's probably enough. Let's do comments, and then I'll say some stuff as I do comments, I think. Anyway, but yeah, they're all rude. I might be blocking some of these people because they're just obnoxiously rude and useless. Not making counter arguments, they're just character assassinating. Quantum mechanics models more than simply electrons interacting with photons. For example, well, maybe I should start at I hate the way these are timed. That's 11 hours ago, 1 day ago. Okay, so I'll start at the bottom. Alright. Let's see. 1 day ago. I don't know if that's the oldest, but yeah, he's got like 5 comments, and it's, it's just all rude. This whole idea of typing more than 1 comment doesn't seem very smart. If you're going to be an arrogant, pontificating asswipe, then you probably should look like somebody who actually thinks about what they type before they type it. It's of no importance that Feynman didn't like Einstein. I didn't say it was of any importance. What I'm indicating is that I'm not obliged to have the same heroes as Pyrrho, and I certainly won't be obedient to his rule that I can't believe these people to be a little ego fixated. If that is really true, which I doubt. Science only works on being right. Well, I'm sorry, that being right stuff is kind of silly when they've been wrong so many times, and especially are wrong. Yeah. Well, I don't even know if that what it really only works on, being right or wrong. I mean, it seems to be working the same way Hollywood works in a lot of ways, right? It's all Hollywood celebrity bullshit science. Most of the people doing the real work aren't getting any credit. I mean, it seems almost as flawed as, entertainment. It doesn't seem like a really legitimate sport. Yeah. Feynman acknowledged that general relativity was right. I don't know. You have evidence that he acknowledged that it was correct? Yeah, I don't think, frankly, I don't think you'll find, I think he acknowledged that it's all we got. And I think that's about as enthusiastic as he was about a lot of what Einstein was talking about. Because like I said, he wouldn't have left out I'm not saying that there is a big difference, right? Feynman was a quantum mechanics guy, okay? He was an electron atom guy. He wasn't a cosmology, big universe kind of guy. So they were kind of different subjects. But anyway, who cares? I talked about fields because that's how he feeled. Yes, yeah, it's a funny joke. It's fairly funny, but yeah, that is the problem with Bureau. A little too touchy-feely. Oh yeah, now it's all back to Newton. Well, all right, and you have no counter argument though, right? I mean, the fact that it would all be kinetic. You know, you don't have any. Your model of the atom doesn't show the mechanism of the atom. It doesn't. You know, go ahead, draw me a picture of an atom, and show me how it makes any sense. How this is connected to that, like the puzzle pieces fit together. That's not how their model works. Their model doesn't explain any of the dynamics. So how would you know that Newton's rules don't apply to the parts that make up an atom right now? You don't know that. You're just talking out of your ass. But yeah, the idea, look, it's not even, Newton shouldn't even get credit, you know, for the idea of kinetic interactions in a frictionless environment. I mean, it's just something you observe. It's not something you need a brilliant person to figure out. You can just imagine it in your brain, and you can figure out the geometry, you know, because it's all pretty simple geometry. So, but yeah, everything comes down to that if that's what it's all made out of, asshole. I'm pretty positive if Newton would have been alive in the 20s and 30s of the last century, he would have been the first to congratulate the new physicist on their accomplishment of renewing his theories. I don't think they renewed him. They spit on him. You know, they were on stupid technicalities. You know, they complained that Newton was way off because, oh yeah, Newton didn't know gravity moved at the speed of light. You know, that the light had a speed. You know, so, you know, it just seems kind of silly to say, oh, Newton was wrong because of that. So yeah, but there was, you know, I'm just saying, what part do you think Newton would just sit there and say, oh yeah, the theory of general relativity, where basically Einstein supposes that, you know, a child could go visit their parents before they were born. Doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. But anyway, that, yeah, Newton would just say, oh yeah, that's just fine. That makes perfectly good sense. I don't think Newton would have really bought that the action in the universe was being caused by a non-mechanism. Space. Scientists aren't vindictive, only dumbasses are. Well, I don't even know what vindictive is. What do you mean by vindictive? So when Feynman took a perfectly good theory that was 200 years old, that somebody did all this work on, and had the huge disadvantage of having an understanding of the speed of light, or a particle-based atom, and he just tore it apart for really dumb reasons. He wasn't being petty. He wasn't being sloppy. He was being a good scientist. I don't think so. Anyway, so another comment by the same asshole. Atomic metabolism, quote, there is no such thing. So you're saying that there's no mechanism. The atoms aren't like dishwashers. They don't have parts that are spinning and doing things. And so they can't slow down those parts. That would be their metabolism. You don't understand that? It's a metaphorical use of words, but I mean, it's done all the time. It's done by people like Einstein. I mean, they come up with phrases, the kind of combinations of words that haven't been used before, because there's something new that's happening, but it's very much like something old. Metabolism is a term which only makes sense in chemical biology. Well, again, I don't think that's true. I think it makes sense in any kind of circumstance where you're talking about a mechanism that does processing, meaning the set of life-sustaining chemical transformations within cells of living organisms. Well, again, says you. Metabolism is already currently used to both describe chemical processes and biological processes, like the slow metabolism, how long it takes something to go through your GI tract, for example, would be a description of metabolism, as would how long does it take to convert the chemistry into energy. Rude fuckers. The point of doing experience observations is to falsify ideas, not to confirm them. I don't know if that's true. Whatever. If the results match the prediction, it doesn't prove the idea true, but at least shows that they are consistent with it being true. Proof is a tricky word, right? So proof, I think, just comes with an abundance of evidence, where sooner or later you're going to make it pretty unrealistic that there could be any other answer, just because it couldn't be just coincidence that so many predictions are correct, or so many it covers so many of the bases, so to speak. Yeah, if you cover all the bases, it seems like, well, that probably is a fit. That's probably called a good puzzle piece to push in permanently. The possibility that another better idea might make the same predictions is left open. Again, I think this word prediction is not worth much. Its explanations are more important than predictions. Einstein didn't really predict lensing. Lensing had already been talked about. What he gave people was a mathematical formula, okay, that would describe the phenomenon. And so he was validating an idea, not predicting it. I mean, I'm just saying that it had already been the conclusion that lensing would be possible, or might be a phenomenon that was happening, was already something talked about in physics before Einstein showed up. Admittedly, scientists are pretty bad at presenting info to the public that will habitually say things like, this is how it is, rather than this is the least crap idea we have to date. Yeah, well, I'm giving Feynman credit. He did once in a while say, well, this is what we think, and it might not be right. So he did once in a while concede. But yes, he wasn't very open to the idea of attempting to describe, which most people interpret as they are making this crap up as they go along. Well, I think string theory is an example of making shit up. I think multiverses is an example of making shit up. I think Field's theory is just lazy as fuck. Let's not even think about it as what's, let's pixelate the universe and give it weight. Well, of course, the universe would be pixelated and you could give it weight. But that's like taking a photograph and saying, there's the universe. I'll pixelate it and I'll just describe it as a bunch of photons of different intensity. Yes, it's sort of accurate, but it's not accurate to the real universe. It's just a tiny clip of it, and that's field theory. It's just a cheap way to describe matter. I mean, it's lazy. But you can't understand how that would really be tedious to have to explain philosophy of science every time you wanted to say something about some obscure subject that 99% of people don't give a flying fuck about anyway. Well, they seem to give a fuck about it because they seem to want to rub the magic brains. They did make Einstein into a celebrity. And currently, there's lots of show scientists out there that people just seem totally infatuated with. So they seem to give a fuck about who is the man. The question is the guy who's called the man really the man? And then, of course, there are journalists, most of whom probably don't have a background and interest in science and wouldn't rather be doing politics columns, who invariably ignore all caveats the science may have given to present his or his message as if it were a proclamation of some arrogant Moses wannabe from on high. I don't even know if that's a problem, but obviously NASA is sort of out of control. They're selling science. There's too many people just selling it. And so they're taking these shortcuts, and then they start talking about how they've invented life, or they found Martians, or they have, organisms on Earth that eat arsenic, or some other kind of crap. DNA, original DNA, new original DNA, when it's really just old dirty DNA. So anyway, we need scientific and engineering solutions, not a us versus them dynamic. Well, it'd be all really nice if everybody just worked together, but the point is that you can't do science in a melting pot of ideas. You really do have to do it either right or wrong. You have to do it on correct premises or incorrect premises. And I'm just saying that physics chose, so to speak, in the early 1900s, a model of the universe that was wrong, and the physics they've been doing is wobbly because of it. Yes, you need to have read Hegel in order to count as a sophisticated human being. Otherwise, you're a caveman like... Well, I mean, let's talk about caveman, right? He's got shit tattooed on his goddamn knuckles and across his tits. Frankly, might be my definition of the modern caveman. I mean, it's about as cliche middle-age crisis man. I think he was born in a middle-age crisis. How are your schools of fish holding together? Well, I mean, I explained this. I really did. If not by some action at a distance. Again, the action at a distance is a field of pressure photons. You can just call them, photons that were trapped in the stages of the Big Bang's expansion. And yeah, there's a density of gravitational photons, gravitons, whatever you want to call them. But yes, it's that density that's holding everything together. It's forcing it together. It's not even holding it together. It's just creating a constant obligation to force consolidated bits to interact with each other. Say an atomic nucleus, what makes it not fly apart? Well, I don't know, I can't make it more obvious. I'm saying there's a bunch of photons constantly smashing from all sides. Okay, anytime you have a nucleus. So as soon as you create something that has a little bit of a mass to it, it blocks the gravity fish, so there's no pressure coming from that side, and then anything over here will end up having to drift towards it because of a lower pressure. Shit. Alright. This is that coax guy, another rude fucker. Yeah, I hate this edited crap too. These people edit comments, which is really obnoxious. I'm still learning, so anyone is free to correct my inaccuracies here, but this is what I've seen so far. It might have been hard to believe, but the fundamental particles that can be waves and particles. But fundamental particles can be waves and particles. Well, I'm just saying, you know how vacuous a statement that is? Sorry. In exactly what form does this happen, and how does this happen, and what mechanism would there be? Again, I'm pointing out the obvious, that if you want to find a wave, you're saying that there's we see that there is a wave product based on an interaction between photons and matter, right? The two slits. And we know that atoms are vibrating. We know that vibrations are what create frequency, and yet you're going to blame the photon. Now, I'm sorry, that does seem a little bit like, whoa, you really did miss the obvious, didn't you? A ferrimon can turn into a boson, and a boson can be a ferrimon. Well, it doesn't matter anyway, but some people say it's all quarks, but this has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So if you want to talk about what they found in atom smashers, which aren't even atom smashers, they're they're atom decomposers, and when atoms decompose, they turn into energy. So they're just smashing energy at energy, and then saying, look at the funny parts we got. I mean, it's a sledgehammer of a microscope, and you people want to play with all these little fancy words, go ahead and play with them, but I don't think they're describing what's called mechanics. Ferrimons are matter, and boson are light. Well, I don't care. It doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about. It's a separate subject. You want to show me somehow how it has anything to do with what I've said so far in any of my videos? The internal dynamics of the atom, in my opinion, is almost irrelevant. But let's say I did really care. Clearly, I could draw you a picture of a solar system or something else, and I could say, well, look, let's just pretend an atom is like a solar system. And then we could just say something like, well, okay, planets are bosons and moons would be ferrimons, and, you know, I mean, we can play that game, but who cares? I mean, you know, these go look at the eyeglasses that they're using with one of these accelerators. Go look at the pair of glasses they're looking through. The 10-ton monstrous piece of technology they have to use to see any of this stuff. And to see it is a bizarre, stupid, idiotic word anyway, right? So, I mean, they're not really seeing any of this stuff. What they're seeing is energy levels and frequencies, and not much else. And then they're drawing a lot of, I think, way too premature conclusions, and then choosing to name the damn thing. I mean, I'm saying you don't even know what kind of dinosaur is popping out of the vagina, and they've already given it a goddamn name. None knows what the underlying quantum fields are. Well, the whole idea of a quantum field is just made up rubbish. All the fields, the electromagnetic, the electron field, and there's only one field, okay, and it's made out of photons or gravitons, and that's all there is. It creates a thing called magnetism as a consequence of polarization. And there's no fields. The Higgs field, no, they're all the same field. Exists everywhere. Oh wow, says you. But the only way they can be detected is as particles, as yes, this is all extra stuff he typed. As quanta in a specific moment. They can't be detected in a specific moment. They can only be seen based on their impacts and what kind of mess they make. So, I mean, this is just, like I said, you're not going to take photographs of photons. The Higgs boson gives electrons mass, says you. Without the Higgs field, electrons would move at the speed of light. But don't see that in your model. Well, you don't see it. I'm already saying that the electrons are moving, the pieces are moving at the speed of light, and all they have to do is get caught in a spiral. All they have to do is caught in a circle that spins, and a plasma, even you could call it. Like, think of a plasma. The stuff inside is always moving around. All they have to do is be stuck in a figure 8, and they'll just stay in one place. So clearly that's in my theory, douchebag. And the Higgs isn't a real phenomenon beyond the fact that magnetism is a consequence of selected, filtered gravity. Electrons would move at the speed of light, but don't see that in your model. Well, it is in my model. Also, individual photons have different energy levels independent of frequency. Individual photons have different energy levels independent of frequency. Well, that you'll have to prove. Or amount of photons. Well, I'm just saying, go ahead, prove that. They can't even prove that a photon is just a single photon, in my opinion. There's absolutely no proof ever produced that where they could say when there's a photon encounter that it's a single photon, that it isn't a pair of photons that are creating the frequency in the first place. So I don't even think you have evidence of that. And look how boldly you're talking here. They have observed. Well, how'd they do that? This is a really big word. I wish I could bold it right on the screen, put in big bold letters. They have observed. No, they haven't. They didn't observe shit. They showed up at the scene of the crime 7 days later, okay, and drew a lot of pathetic conclusions. This in the photoelectric effect, where metals emit electrons when they shine light on it. Oh, I can't believe that you're going to bring that up, because that clearly isn't independent of frequency or the number of photons, because it's clearly dependent on the fact that ultraviolet light goes in and infrared light comes out, right? 4 times as many photons go in, 4 photons go in, let's say, and then 2 separate packets of infrared light come out. It's the same amount of photons, but yeah, obviously when they're coming out in, 5 little fish will make more noise in a system than 1 big fish. That might be a rule to kind of understand. So when you break energy into pieces, you create more opportunity for chaos creation, which could appear like heat, right? Chaos and heat might be similar ideas. I mean, explicitly they're not, but I just mean anything that adds chaos to a system would add the impression of adding heat. So that's just a nonsensical statement. It doesn't matter how many photons of a long wavelength one shines on it. Well, again, it doesn't matter because they're going through it, you shithead. Obviously, as I've said pretty overtly, electrons are photosensitive, so to speak. They only react to photons of specific frequency. Radio waves will go right through them. Cosmic rays will go right through certain atoms. Okay, and they'll only react to certain frequencies. They have to be vibrated at just the right frequency to create an effect. So, you know, it doesn't matter how much you shine on them. Doesn't mean anything if what you're shining on them isn't being absorbed. Retard. They don't have energy enough energy. Well, it's not that, again, you say enough energy. No, they don't come frequently enough. So I've talked about the tipping point, but a tipping point is all it is. You have a pole, you're throwing tennis balls at it. If you throw the tennis balls really quickly, it'll fall over, like two really quick in succession. Because you hit it, it doesn't rebound, it falls over. If you throw them slowly, it just bounces back and it doesn't fall over, and you can throw them forever, and it'll just keep rebounding back and rebounding back. But you have to throw them quickly enough, I mean, in succession, it'll tip over. Not a complex concept, very Newtonian. Read about Newton. Yeah, so you just, But if you get into very short wavelengths, there's a lot of electrons coming out. Yeah, well, they're not electrons coming out, but they're electrons moving, photons coming out. And the point is that, yeah, exactly my point. Short wavelengths have more photons. Also, as far as black holes are concerned, that's one of the points Einstein made in the bending of space-time. Well, there's no space-time. Space itself bends because of gravity. Well, it doesn't happen. Because of gravity? You know, that's almost an idiotic thing to say. He's saying gravity is created by bent space, so I don't think you can have it both ways. Light still goes in a straight line. Well, it doesn't. Even though your model is intuitive to human mind, doesn't make it correct. Well, I'm not even saying it's all intuitive, but the point is that I think it's kind of obvious that it does start fitting into a bunch of where you can break it down to a kinetic model that makes sense, and the kinetic model ends up coherent with the more complex group model, and then the more complex society model is, you know, if you can tie social society to multicellular organism to microbe to DNA molecule, you know, that ends up if you can find the same mechanisms in all 3 or 4 of those different levels of function, the same expression of a formula or a pattern, that's pretty good news for a theory, I think. There are many complications and observed effects that prohibit a straightforward mechanical model of it. Well, I don't think that's true at all. The straightforward model is that electrons and photons interact with each other, and there's a ton of electrons around all kinds of celestial bodies, and it isn't the space that's bending the light, it's interaction with electrons. Any place in space where there's a density of electrons, maybe even a nebula, as Spiro brought up, full of all kinds of subatomic particles, unformed atoms, you know, unfinished, lots of opportunity for interaction. Alright, my dot guy is so annoying. Not all bosons are massless, so who cares? Fermions are particles that spin that are half integers, yes, 1/2, 2, 3 seconds, 5 twos. So what? I mean, this is the idea. There's pattern all the way down. Yeah, that's the point. There's pattern all the way down, and the pattern is the function of the kinetics. Individual photons have energy that is entirely dependent on their frequency. Well, there you go. So he's arguing with the other guy. This is what the photoelectric showed. The emission of an electron from the metal is independent. The electrons weren't emitted. You know, the electrons communicate photons, and so they pass on a vibration or a density of photons, independent of number of photons arriving at the target per unit of time or intensity of light. Independent of number of photons arriving at the target per time or the intensity of the light. Well, it's not independent of it's not certainly not independent of the intensity of the light. The intensity of the light is the volume of the light. The more light you shine, the more electricity you'll get out of a photo detector. So that's not true. So you didn't write that very well. So you should have edited that. Cool. Thanks for the boson and fermion information. The last post was my point. Yeah, Venom has been saying energy in photons is because more photons. Energy in photons is because of more photons that are all equal. And again, neither one of you have made an argument explaining how it's not true. How many photons there are per unit of time is a description of energy. The photons are the energy. They're a little bit of energy. It doesn't get any smaller. They're the smallest little bit. You can't break one into pieces. These people are so annoying. Alright. Yeah, I guess this video is going to get way too long. Because I got this snarky asshole still to fuck with here. Alright, I guess I'll just do this one first. Quantum mechanics models are more than simply electrons interacting with photons. For example, the magnetic moment of the neutron is computed using quantum mechanics. Well, again, the formulas, the patterns are going to be the same because it's all the same kind of mechanism, and it all has to do with circles, probably, largely, spheres, so you guess most of the models are going to have some kind of parabola in them or some kind of effect like that. Yeah, that's right. So with lensing, you know, it's the idea that an atmosphere around a spherical object at any one angle, it would be more dense the closer you get to the surface. So the closer you get to the surface, the more electrons you have to go through. And the further away you get from the surface, the less electrons you have to get through, which is the creation of a lens. That's what a lens is. The lens goes like this and then goes down again. Well, it can also just go like this and stop, and you still have a lens. And the magnetic moment is just the... brings up that it's just like the tension, you know, the magnetic tension in an atom, let's say. So there's magnetism in atoms. That's what's keeping them from collapsing on themselves. That's what's forcing the electron not to go into the nucleus, is that they have a magnetic repulsion because the nucleus is filtering a different graviton than the electron is filtering, which is creating a more pressure than less pressure between them because they're filtering different amounts of gravitons. Light is affected by gravity. Why do you think black holes are black holes? Well, I explained that, so you're such an asshole. And no, you haven't proven light is affected by gravity. If you really want to know, light is affected by interaction with electrons. If you really want to know, you would, that's what quantum electrodynamics is. Quantum electrodynamics. That was what the science was originally called, and it's really about photons interacting with electrons. That's what Feynman diagrams are. If you really want to know, you would try to understand what he is saying here, unless your comment is simply an echo that's scraped from the chamber. I don't know what that means. Alright, so I know enough physics after studying mathematics at uni, so it must be some kind of foreign creep, to know when someone is talking utter bullshit. Thank you. Oh, I don't think you know shit about math, actually. I don't think you understand the theory of math. Mathematics is a description of relationships, and that's entirely what I'm talking about, is relationships. Asshole. I'm sorry, but your equations for gravity in which you punch in numbers for the variables does not... Oh, here. Yeah, I don't don't know what this doesn't seem related to that. I guess it starts from the bottom and it goes up. It really shouldn't, should it? Well, it doesn't matter. You don't think you know what you're talking about. General relativity is a remarkably accurate theory. So right there, you know. Oh, so it's remarkably accurate to have a theory that basically makes it possible for somebody to go to their father's house before they were born. And there's no way Gary can get away from that fact. Well, I think there's lots of ways I can get away from that fact by coming up with a better explanation than magical bent space to describe the convergence and to explain that the convergence doesn't have anything to do with time, it has to do with distance. As to your final point, maybe not when it comes to advanced theoretical physics involving unification of quantum field theories in general relativity. Well, then why are you talking like you know what you're talking about? But there are a few out there who do, and you know who they are, right? You don't know anything about it, you're not too expert, but you certainly know who the experts are. Yeah, you're qualified to declare them experts. It sounds like a God theory to me. God told you to believe in God. No, the Son of God told you to believe in God. Anyway, and they aren't really to be found in anti-natalist circles on YouTube. Well, I don't know what that has to do with anything. It's clearly evident that Gary is talking out of his ass. Yeah, clearly evident by what fact? Oh, yes, your bigotry. Oh, okay, cool. When it's apparent that he doesn't have the required grasp of the mathematics to even understand basic mechanisms and Newtonian physics. Well, prove it. Let alone the graduate level mathematics of differential geometry, right? I don't really have a whole lot of, you know, manifolds. I know what vectors are, I know what tensors are, and I'm saying some of that shit, tensors are pretty much just made up. I mean, pretty much. Look, quantum mechanics requires a different formula for every circumstance. That's not exactly great math. When you have to change the formula, you know, fiddle with the constants for every formula, for every circumstance. It's not a great. I wouldn't call that a great hunk of math. And like I said, if you get into Einstein's general relativity mathematics, not too many people think it makes any sense anyway. Required to understand the theories he claims to disprove. I don't have to understand it, and I don't think it is understandable, frankly. Like I said, if you take Einstein's statements seriously and you take them into a real circumstance, they just create ludicrous circumstances that can't possibly happen. So I'm sorry, where the speed of light is broken, where it just can't physically happen. Where are Gary's peer review papers? Where was Einstein's before Max Planck came to the rescue? Oh, that's right, Einstein was entirely ignored until Planck, okay, got a hold of his papers. And basically, he was the god of physics at the time, and he's the one that made Einstein. If it wasn't for Planck, Einstein might still be eating mashed potatoes every night. Why hasn't he submitted anything for scientific scrutiny? Well, I have harassed a few physicists, and we'll see. I mean, right at the moment, haven't you notice the title of the channel, DraftScience? Right at the moment, I'm still compiling an understanding of it myself. I'm just saying that I announced the fact once I was sure I was onto something, and I'm just saying, and as every week passes I'm more certain I'm onto something, and I'm describing what I'm onto. And so what kind of, like I said, will you take a video of you eating crow, you know, when I'm demonstrated to be quite correct in this analysis, fuckhead? Can we bet some real money on it? You know, I mean, you're going to slander me, you're going to malign me. Do I get some way to punch you in the ass, you little fucking troll? When I'm right, when I'm proven right? Huh? What's your penalty for this obnoxious crap? Yeah. He's just spent the last few years developing some sort of simplistic, two-dimensional... Oh, curved space isn't two-dimensional at all. Yeah, oh yeah, no, that's not a two-dimensional model at all. Yeah, there's no way to make three-dimensional models, asshole, anyway. But guess what? A school of fish is pretty three-dimensional if you think about it, shithead. Think about it. If you think about it. qualitative model which doesn't hold water, well, says you in arrogant, obnoxious pontification of yours. I think it's holding water so far, and you certainly haven't poked any holes in it with these fucking insults, you fucking bag of shit. And is incapable of making a single prediction. Like I said, I will make some predictions. I'm predicting that Einstein was completely wrong. Velocity is absolute, and it does cause substantial metabolic change in the atoms being velocitized. I'll also predict that all velocity is something that happens atomically. You don't move. There's no such thing as momentum, okay? What there is a change in your atomic structure that compels you to keep moving. You are the mechanism that keeps you moving, okay? And that's what gravity's doing to objects. When you're in a gravitational field, the gravitational field is imposing acceleration by changing the electrodynamic structure of your atoms. The shape of them. Essentially what is known as bullshit. Yeah, well, you're full of fucking shit. And like I said, you want to bet some real fucking money, you little weaselly cunt? I'm talking real big fucking juicy money. You have any money? You have something we can bet? Maybe your foot. Can we bet feet? I'll cut my fucking foot off if I'm wrong. How's that? Will you cut your foot off, you little fucking troll? General relativity is a model that fits observations. Yeah. Gary's model also confirms to the mass. Yeah, okay, this is the guy defending. We'll just do the guy. Thank you for arguing with these guys. I appreciate that somebody goes to the trouble. 3 points. Firstly, Gary wants to make claims about science and pass them off as fact. What is that? I'm passing it off as a theory, as an explanation of the causes of the function of the universe. I don't know why that's against the law, you fucking cunt! You should submit a paper for peer review. Well, again, I've already looked into that, and guess what? It's not as simple as you think. You don't get to just write a paper, say, hey, will you, one of you smartasses watch about 10 videos here, and will you, work on this, blah, blah, blah. And obviously, it's not going to be something you can just write up like Einstein had the advantages of. Okay, again, Einstein was working in a much simpler world where you could say much simpler things and get away with it. I obviously don't have that advantage. Otherwise, his endeavors are pointless and won't lead to anything. Well, I don't think I think that's almost idiotic, because if I'm right, it doesn't matter when I'm declared right. The fact is I was right, you stupid asshole. So how could that be exactly pointless? And wouldn't it be pointless as if I am right and they waited 10 or 20 years to figure out that I'm right? Then who was fucking pointless? Who was the criminal then? I made public videos explaining a theory, and all you assholes did was shit on it. Okay? Well, then who would be the wrong person in that scenario? Oh, I think it would be you, asshole. I'll pay people to review. I'll pay professionals to review my theory, okay? So, yeah, $1,000, all right, for a PhD physicist to disprove what I'm saying. $1,000. I'll pay you $1,000 if you have a PhD in some sort of nuclear type physics. So at least you have some knowledge of this shit. Quantum mechanics type physics. So if you want $1,000, I'll pay $1,000. You want me to raise a bounty? Is that what we'd really have to do? I mean, I said I would take a year to do this. Okay, let's just say in 3 months, if I'm getting the same kind of low-class bullshit comments from you fuckers, I'll open a Patreon, I'll collect goddamn money to pay a bounty to some cunt physicist to do his scientific job and analyze legitimate theories that, frankly, they never gave a fair shot to. Again, this theory is an extrapolation, okay, that basically has at its kernel an observation that was made 200 fucking years ago that science shat on, that the scientific community shat on, because they didn't want a nice mechanical model. They wanted a phantasmagorical fairy model. All right, and that's the only reason why that 200-year-old theory got shat on, is because physicists are Tinkerbell fucking religious kooks who have no respect for the truth. There, how's that, fucker? I do know the basics of differential geometry, which doesn't have anything to do with anything. topology and vector spaces, etc. Yeah, and again, look, the formulas are kind of tricky, right? Because there's all different ways you can draw these triangles, right? You know, let's say you're all just doing side angle side type things. You're doing what do they call that? Not civics. What's the word for the surveyors when they go out and do the geometry to figure out how far away something is or how tall the building should be? Land surveyors. There's a word for that. Well, anyway. But yeah, so those are like, but there's all kinds of different ways you can get to the same answer, right? There's all kinds of different ways you can draw the triangle, and you can either do like a sine, or you can do the tangents, or you can do the. So let's not play a game that all this math is necessary, okay? And that it isn't describing the same set of variables and just manipulating them in different ways. Again, my argument would be I'm going to use the same variables in two-slit analysis. I'm just going to blame, okay, the constants and the thing added to represent the wave function. I'm just going to argue that it's the creation of that function is the electrons, not the photons. But not the required level to disprove a direct claim. It would require someone with at least a PhD in theoretical physics to do so. And again, I'll pay them. How's that? So what's the bounty? What do these PhDs need to give a fuck about science? Yeah, to defend their science. And I don't think there are such people watching Gary's videos from what I've seen. Right, so I have to go out and bribe some of these show scientists to put their credibility on the line. And wouldn't that be funny, though, if their credibility ends up on the line, right? So now they'll be like politicians. They'll avoid doing it because they'll have nothing to gain trying to refute a theory that sounds too fucking good. Yeah, and finally, asserting someone is wrong because they go against scientific consensus is actually quite a safe thing to do. Yeah, and that's what you're doing. Especially if it concerns someone who hasn't shown they understand mathematics to any deep level beyond that of high school student. Yeah, well, I did take trigonometry. But whatever. Again, I mean, your obsession with this whole mathematical crap. Math is a model, and it's not a very deep, revealing model. So I'm just saying that all I'm saying is I can give you a model, and you can do all the math you want to on it till the end of time if math turns you on. But to me, conceptually understanding relationships is more important than understanding them in the terms of explicit mathematical formulas. Understanding why there's a relationship between the diameter of a circle and its circumference is a lot more important than understanding how to manipulate 3.14, blah, 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 all that kind of crap. Yeah. Understanding the idea of a square and the idea that the white space is always going to be the same, no matter how big or small, as a percentage of the circle. I mean, these are interesting, and understanding those relationships, understanding them is more important than being able to mimic them. Yeah, that's kind of like, yeah, so it's like, even like in philosophy, understanding the logic is a lot more important than being able to mimic the rhetoric. If he thinks making claims which go against our understanding of our understanding, I just love this. Who are you? Who is your R group? Then he should back them up with, I'll back them up with evidence and money and all kinds of things. Or a sound mathematical paper which can be scrutinized. I don't need a mathematical paper because my math is the same math that Newton already did the fucking math, asshole. And frankly, the math of the raw kinetics of the exchange of